So, welcome everybody to this 14th webinar of the outcome harvesting community, this time on leveraging AI for outcome harvesting. We're happy to see a lot of new faces and also familiar faces, but for the new people, know that you're always welcome to join our community, which you can do through the forum page on our outcomeharvesting.net website. My name is Conny Hoitink. I'm an independent consultant in outcome harvesting, and I'm based in the Netherlands. And I'm one of the 3 facilitators of this outcome harvesting community. I do this together with Carmen Wilson-Grau. Carmen, can you say hi briefly?
Yes, hi everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm based in Guatemala, and as Conny mentioned, one of the facilitators of the outcome harvesting community.
Thanks, Carmen. And the 3rd facilitator is Goele Scheers. Goele, can you present yourself?
Hi everyone. So my name is Goele Scheers. I'm an independent consultant and specialized in outcome harvesting, and as Conny said, one of the outcome harvesting community facilitators.
Okay, thank you. Goele will present today, and she will do that together with Leon Hemkemeyer. Leon, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leon Hemkemeyer. I'm the head of programs at the European Partnership for Democracy, EPD. We are a network of 20 democracy support organizations based in Brussels. And I also am taking up a part-time parallel master program on evaluation. So I've merged those 2 projects, let's say, together to experiment a bit with AI, and happy to present today.
Ah, wow, precious knowledge. Thank you. Before I give you the floor and we start, as always, I would like to encourage you that if one of you are interested to present yourselves on outcome harvesting, your experiences, please do write to us, because we're always interested to hear new stories and to learn more on outcome harvesting. As we are many today, please stay muted during the presentation of Leon and Goele. You can write your questions in the chat, and we will make sure we'll have 20 minutes to address these. And if time proves too short, we can always continue the discussion on this issue in our email-based online community. Lastly, we will record this webinar for sharing on our website. Goele, over to you.
Yes, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us for this webinar. So Leon and I will be taking you through this webinar on using generative AI for outcome harvesting. So AI is a hot topic these days, and you will have seen many posts coming by about how you can use AI for evaluation. And so it's also a good time to think about how can we use AI for outcome harvesting specifically. So Leon and I want to share our thinking in this webinar, and basically this webinar is meant for you to stimulate your thinking on this subject, and also to stimulate you to get motivated to start exploring with AI for outcome harvesting. So Conny, having said that, if you can move to the agenda slide. Yes. So what we will do in this webinar is that we will introduce you to just very briefly to some AI concepts, so everybody knows what we're talking about, because some people will be very familiar with AI and some will not be that familiar. And to take you through how AI can be used for the different steps of outcome harvesting, just very briefly, before we then go into demonstrating you 3 bots that we have developed for outcome harvesting. So we demonstrate you a bit how it really works in practice. And then we will share our findings, our reflections on this. And finally, there's time for questions from your side. Okay, then Leon, over to you for what is artificial intelligence.
Yes, thank you, Goele. So we risk repeating a bit for those who are already aware, but we thought it was nevertheless useful to clarify some of these concepts. And there's a definition here on the screen. Essentially, what is important to take away is that artificial intelligence is anything that tries to simulate human decision-making or human problem-solving, human behavior, but by machines, or in the most cases by computer systems. Next slide, please. And it's also important to differentiate between artificial intelligence, which is a global term, and generative artificial intelligence, which is what we will be discussing today. So when we say AI throughout this webinar today, we always refer to generative AI, which is artificial intelligence that can produce content. So that can be in the form of images or audio or video. And what we'll be looking at mostly today is text. Next slide, please. So one of these models within the generative artificial intelligence family have been called large language models, or short LLMs. And these essentially are trained to work on text. They have been trained on extensive text data, and they are therefore now able to understand text and to also generate text almost in a human-like fashion. And you'll have heard about the most famous example, which is OpenAI's ChatGPT. Next slide, please. So these LLMs have the ability to do a number of things with text. They can generate and write. They can also look at text and classify information. They can summarize text, answer questions on the basis of text, extract information. They can also translate. So new languages are being added to these models now. They can recognize themes and many more things that I think for you already will point or have pointed to the usefulness for evaluative tasks. Please, if you have used a large language model already, if you can go to reactions at the bottom of your screen, and you'll find a green check mark or a white check mark on a green circle, a yes sign. If you could just activate that so we get a bit of a sense of how many of you are already familiar with it. Next slide, please.
Okay, so how can these large language models be used for outcome harvesting then? And so basically for every step of outcome harvesting, there will be a use for AI where it adds value. But so I have a quick overview with some thoughts of how it could be used per step. There are many more ways in how it could be used, but just to stimulate your thinking a bit on this. So for example, during the design step, the AI tool can analyze past outcome harvesting projects to inform your design. So you make informed decisions on your design based on things, data from the past. It can suggest data collection techniques for you, or basically you could build a bot that takes you through the steps to develop a outcome harvesting design as well. So those are some options. When it comes to harvesting outcomes, two things that it really does well is to process the documents for document review to identify potential outcomes. So we can just digest a lot of information and take the outcomes from there. And it can also assist you in formulating your outcome statements. Now, when it comes to substantiation, AI could be used for cross-verification of the information. So it can check that information of the outcome statements with the data that it has, the knowledge that it has. To see, it can be a first step before you go to actual substantiators, for example, to check it with AI. It can identify gaps in information, things that are missing in your outcome statements or your data set. And it can also help you formulate questions when you go to substantiators. For the analysis and interpretation, it can do deep data analysis to uncover trends and patterns in your data. And it can also discover insights when it comes to interpretation. And basically can be really helpful for analysis interpretation in the sense that it can identify trends and insight that you have been missing when you do your own analysis and interpretation. So it's a useful partner there. When it comes to the support for the use of findings, you could use AI to do predictive analysis, for example, some forecasting. So that might be something interesting to further explore. For example, it could say like which outcomes would be good to achieve in the next phase, for example, so to do a bit of prediction there. It can also help you in customizing the presentation of the findings for different stakeholders. or to facilitate your strategic decision making based on the insights of artificial intelligence. So this is just a quick overview of those steps, and we will be mainly focusing in this webinar on the step 2, the harvesting of outcomes, and the analysis and interpretation. And to do this, we've developed 3 tools, 3 bots, so to say. So these 3 bots were developed using OpenAI's option to create custom GPTs. So this is a very new function that allows you to create custom GPTs using natural language instead of coding. And OpenAI has just launched this functionality this November, so it's very new. And as with all things that are new, there are always some bugs or things that have to be improved still. So, but nevertheless, we think this is a very interesting features. And so basically, Leon and I had the same thinking when they launched these custom GPTs, and we over our Christmas holidays developed a few bots that could help with outcome harvesting. OpenAI does not really provide guidelines on how to develop these bots, so which means that for us it's also a trial and error process to make them well functioning. In that sense, before you all start asking the question, where can we get these bots? They are not yet in the public domain. And the reason why is because what I just said, the custom GPTs have just been launched and we just developed this. So we want to make sure that they're first functioning well enough, and they need to go through a testing phase. So if you are interested in using these bots, you can write an email to us. We will give you our email addresses at the end of this presentation. And we can send you a link to the bots and you can test them out. And in return, we would like to ask you to provide us with some feedback. So to mention which errors you still see, things that we could still improve in these bots. Keep in mind, though, that to be able to use these bots, you would need a ChatGPT 4 subscription. Okay, then having said that, I'm going to hand over to Leon to show the first bot. So Conny, you can stop the screen sharing.
Thank you, Goele. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen now. This is what ChatGPT looks like. I'm sure many of you know this view. If you don't have a paid subscription, you may not know that or have seen these different menu items here on the left, at the top left. This is where your created or the GPTs that you either created or subscribed to appear. Today, I will be demonstrating a bit of the work that I've done with the Outcome Harvester version 2. Yeah, on the left-hand side, you see some recent conversations that I've had that were using this Outcome Harvester. So I'll be first showing how I intend this to be used, for this to be used. We have a lot, and I'm speaking about my organization, so the main part of the work that I do at EPD, we have a lot of project reports that come in. And the idea was, okay, how could we look at these or treat these documents that we receive quickly in order to extract outcomes without actually having to go through them yourself. I will comment on the question of whether that's advisable or not at the end of the webinar. But essentially, you can attach here different files. So I will just do that now. Oops. 1 second. So this is an anonymized report that looks a lot like similar reports that we receive. Maybe I'll actually show you very quickly how that looks like so that you know the data that the bot will look at. Give me 1 second. So here you see the report. This was about a project in Mongolia. Like I've said, all the Information here has been changed in terms of organizations and people, and they describe different activities. There's a list here, or yeah, more description of activities. There's meeting information. There's a section here on different stakeholders and what they thought was already achieved. That's how the report looks. So just for you to have an impression. So I'm going to go back now to the bot. I've already added here the document, and I'll tell the bot to please identify outcomes in this report. The bot now looks through knowledge that I have given to it, and it creates a table that has been customized to an outcome harvesting purpose. So it follows the usual structure of outcome harvesting. Keeps writing. And it finds 3 outcomes. So I'm not going to go into the details here. We can have maybe just a quick look at the outcome statement. So it follows the usual structure. This NGO was included in a working group by the ministry, I know this, of social affairs to revise a law. And then the bot here essentially says that this is significant because there's been a shift in policy making. It identifies that multi-stakeholder dialogue and advocacy efforts were somehow related to that outcome materializing. It doesn't recognize any missing information, and it also is not asking for any additional clarifications. Okay, so that's one example. I'll do another quick one if I still have time. 1 minute. Maybe I'll skip it and I'll come back to it later on if we have time. So back to you, Goele.
Okay, then let's look at the next bot. Let me share the screen. So you will see a similar screen as you just saw from Leon. But this is a different bot, so it's called Harvest Helper. And so whereas Leon's bot is focusing on the documents, this bot is helping you to refine your outcomes or to identify your outcomes. So you see here some pre-developed questions. So please help me refine my outcome statement, for example, or please help me identify and formulate outcome statements. So for this webinar, I'm going to demonstrate the first one. So please help me refine my outcome statements. It's being a bit slow, but the Harvest Helper is saying, of course, I'd be happy to help you refine your outcome statement. That's nice. Could you please provide me with a draft of your current outcome statement? This will allow me to understand the specific aspects that may need refining and guide you through enhancing each component, the outcome description, significance description, and the contribution description. So I've have a draft outcome here, which is an anonymized outcome, and I've taken out different elements here in the outcome statement so that it's not a very good outcome yet. And I'm going to give it to the Harvest Helper. So it says, thank you for sharing this outcome statement. Let's refine it together, focusing on each component. And so then basically what it tells you is that per each of these components, it will tell you what is missing in the outcome description. And just let it finish. Okay, so it will tell you the date and place is missing indeed. So it has to be specified when this drafting of the law took place. So this is basically about the ministry of, it says Kazakhstan, it doesn't even say which ministry, involving organizations of persons with disabilities in a draft or on a chapter on persons with disability in the law. And so the action of involving organizations of persons with disability is clear, but could you specify a bit more how their involvement influenced the drafting? Specific impact of the change. So you've mentioned the expected increase in the level of integration into the labor market. Can you provide any projections? So this here is going a bit too far, so it's not really necessary to include that. But the contextual importance is also important to include here. So while you've outlined the importance of the organizations of persons with disabilities involvement, could you detail any previous attempts or barriers to such involvements that highlight the significance of this change? So indeed, that aspect was not yet included in the significance description. And so for the contribution, it's asking for more specificity on the activities. So it says you've mentioned that CLP, which is a partner organization, met with the ministry and provided support. Could you give detail about the nature of the technical and logistical support? We all know that technical support can be quite vague. So what exactly does it mean if they provided technical support? And also the timing of the activity. So there are no dates, etc., connected to the activities here. So let me just check how much time I have. I still have a bit of time, just 1 minute. Okay, let me just, so responding to these questions is going to take a long time when I type it. So I'm just going to go to the same example where I've put in the additions. So basically, I'm telling Harvest Helper, here are the additions you asked for, and I provide the additions. And then what the Harvest Helper does is to actually refine that outcome statement. So this is the second ping pong where it says, okay, thank you for that information. Let me give a suggestion of how the outcome could be written. So you see here the full outcome description. In July 2018, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection of Kazakhstan involved organizations of persons with disabilities in the drafting of the chapter on persons with disabilities for the employment promotion law through a technical sub-working group. This was a new approach. That part could come in the significance, maybe. But in the significance, so it has added the information to make it more precise, to say that the direct involvement of this organization marks a significant departure from previous practices where their voices were heard only through public demonstrations. So this involvement ensures that the legislation is informed by those it directly affects, paving the way for more inclusive policy-making processes, etc., etc. And for the contribution as well, it has included the specificities there. So it actually is a well-defined outcome statement. So this is the Harvest Helper. I'm gonna move. So this really helps you to formulate the outcome. And maybe just to add, so this is like, this could be useful for people who are harvesters who want to speed up the process for harvesting. And of course, there are some things that still could be improved to make it a bit better, so sources could use it independently as well. I'm going to move to the Harvest Analyst. So this has a different functionalities. So I have to say I've focused most of my time on the Harvest Helper, so this one can definitely still be improved with more instructions, but just to give you a glance of what it could do for analysis and interpretation. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a database of outcomes, an Excel sheet with outcome statements which haven't been classified. And I'm going to ask if we can categorize the outcome descriptions according to the social actors that it can find. Might take some time, so let's see what it comes up with, if it finds the categories that are needed in this document. So it explains a bit what it's doing. Needs a bit of time, so bear with us. It's quite some information to digest. So it's taking out the social actors now from the column. There are other tools, by the way, available for if you want to test it out yourself and you don't have a ChatGPT 4 subscription. So one AI tool that can be useful as well and that you can just use for free is Julius AI, which has actually the added value that it can create Excel files itself. And so whereas the GPT-4 does not create Excel files. Okay, it's taking a long time, so I'm just going to show you the example that I have here to make it a bit quicker. So basically what it will do after he has thought about the different columns, it will give the different types of social actors. So it will say, these are the outcome descriptions that I've categorized, and these are the actors that I can find. So you see here a big category of changes in governmental actors. And so what it can do as well is, I've told it to please create a graph based on these categories. And so the harvest analyst creates a graph of the number of outcomes for the different social actors. Once you have that, it can also go further. So if we look a bit at the interpretation, so I asked Harvest Analyst, based on all the outcome descriptions in the government category, could you elaborately describe what the types of changes were that were achieved within that government category? And so you will see that it categorizes the outcomes here further. So it says, according to the types of changes. So some of the changes are according to policy development and reform, institutional changes and responses, legislative changes. So it builds it up nicely, describing the types of changes. What you could do as well is ask it to reference the outcomes in here or give examples of outcomes that relate to these different categories, these different types of changes as well. So basically it says these type of changes indicate a broad spectrum of impacts in the governmental sector, ranging from legislative and policy reforms to institutional changes and capacity building efforts. So each outcome represents a step towards more responsive, inclusive, and effective governance. So that is just to give you some insight at a glance of some things that it can do when it comes to the analysis and interpretation. Okay, I'm gonna stop the screen sharing there. And Conny, if you could put the presentation back up. Let's see, there's a lot of questions coming in the chat, so we'll get back to those in a moment. But first, we want to give you some of our reflections on using these tools. So what have we found by using it? Some of the benefits is that where AI really adds value, of course, is that it does save a lot of time for your work and also in that sense, resources that are saved. So if AI can just, scan easily through a lot of documents to identify these outcomes for document review, of course, it saves a tremendous amount of time. If it helps you to speed up the ping-ponging process, defining these outcomes, it really saves a lot of time. It can also help you to examine the methodological soundness of what you're doing. So to check that what you're doing is really in line with outcome harvesting. It can, but basically it complements the human findings. Yeah? So you still need a human being to work on the outcome harvesting process. It doesn't replace us as outcome harvesters, but it can really be a very good addition to what we are doing. Yeah? So you can take this information, for example, what I just showed you for the analysis and interpretation. It can be that it sees things that we have overlooked. And in that sense, it's nice to check what you have and compare it with what AI can find to see if that adds value for your analysis and interpretation. So it really provides a basis for further human examination. And a plus as well that it may also help to overcome some language barriers, specifically when it comes to formulating outcomes, for example, because the AI tool will immediately just correct the language as well and make it easier for people, for example, when they have to formulate in English and it's not their first language, to formulate the outcomes. But so definitely we have found that it's a really good help to save time and resources. Okay, Conny, next slide. But there's always a however. And so the however here is that the factual accuracy and reliability, it's not always accurate. So 9 out of 10 times it will give you a correct response, and then the other time it will not give you the right response. So that means you can't always just rely on AI, and therefore the message like the human aspect is still needed, but it can help your work, but don't just trust it fully. There have been issues with ChatGPT where it has been forgetful, so people noticing that, but OpenAI AI has recently said that it solved some of these issues, but just to say that this can happen as well, that you instruct it to do something, but then it forgets your instructions and it starts asking you different things. Boundaries. So what we experience is that sometimes there are questionable decisions about the level of detail. That's of course also a bit difficult, like where should it stop saying that it needs more details on the outcomes, for example. So it has to take that decision, which is easy for us as a human being to do, but might be more difficult for the tool itself to decide. So sometimes it can just keep on asking questions where actually it's already good enough. So in that sense, we feel that it has a pressure to deliver. So it wants to show you something, although maybe it's not needed anymore. So it may sometimes be that it asks for more detail on the significance description where actually it's already good enough. So it's really this pressure to deliver. Leon, do you want to add to that?
Yes, so this is something that I've come across quite a bit, where usually the outcome descriptions in the table that I've generated are quite accurate, because it's more tangible information that the bot is able to recognize in the text. But then when it comes to significance, which in any case for a lot of us is always a bit subjective, but I mean there are contextual factors that need to be taken into consideration. It sometimes doesn't have access to these factors or doesn't have the background information. But instead of saying cannot really say why this is significant, it tries to just provide you with a statement that ends up being very bland in a lot of the cases. And the same is true for the contribution description. So often it just assumes that, okay, because this happened, this must have happened, but it doesn't. Often it goes in a very wrong direction there.
Yeah. And then in terms of methodological soundness, so it's difficult for the tools to differentiate between outcomes, outputs, and activities. And we've gone a far way with solving that. So some things may be solved by us programming it further to do so, but it's also linked to this pressure to deliver. So sometimes if an outcome is provided that is actually an output, then it will feel this pressure to identify it as an outcome. So that's something we're still working on, but maybe also a flaw a bit. Leon?
Yes, so this was mentioned in the chat, whether it has the ability to make those conceptual differences. And for me, this was one of the biggest challenges in trying to get it functional. And it repeatedly gave me activities as outcomes, or presented me activities as outcomes. And only by repeating in the instructions, repeating many times that it's about behavioral change, it's not about things that actors do, and just putting that as very important and multiple times, it finally gave up doing that. And I've also had I've successfully, let's say, tried examples. That would have been the second example that I wanted to show, where you provide a report that is essentially only about activities. And it just in response says, I cannot find any outcomes in this report. So that was a good success. On the flip side, after I've brought it that far, it also provided the same response for reports where I thought there are indeed outcomes. So then in that case, I had to, it told me the same thing. There's no outcomes in this report, while I knew there were outcomes in that report. And I said, can you please check again? And I kind of asked it to try again. And then only it provided me with a table, and then indeed found some of these outcomes. So it's still not very systematic in that way, and you still kind of need to work with it to get it to do what you want it to do.
Will you continue with completeness, Leon?
Of course. So a similar or related challenge that I've seen is that it always stops for me at a number of 3 to 5 outcomes. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case. It may have something to do with the length of the response that it's trained to give. So it doesn't provide you a table that is maybe 10 outcomes long. It kind of, stops at some point. So that is a big problem, because then you, if you don't do the double checking yourself, you may just assume, okay, there's 3 outcomes in this report, while there are actually 6 or 7.
Yeah. And then consistency, which you may have noted if you used ChatGPT or other of these tools before, is that if you ask exactly the same question in the same tool or another tool, the way it responds might look differently. So you will get that here as well. So it doesn't answer consistently. It doesn't mean it's not right. It's just that the way it provides the answer is in a different way. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, and on my side, I've seen the same. You provide the same report, and sometimes it will give you the similar outcomes, but sometimes it excludes one and includes another one. So yeah, that's still a big problem.
Okay, next slide, Conny.
Okay. Thank you, Conny. So we have a few recommendations. The first one, I think we've already alluded to quite a bit, is that so far we don't suggest that these bots can replace the work that you have to do as an evaluator or a user of outcome harvesting, but they can assist your work. And that's across the different steps. We've shown you a few examples for some of the more middle steps, but yeah, in my case, for example, I would at this moment not yet trust for the tool to do the job of identifying outcomes in a document. I would, however, find it useful for maybe double checking some work that I've already done and seeing whether there's anything that I've missed in my own review. I suspect that this will improve with time as these models get better and better, but so far these would be our recommendations. Another recommendation is that by following an incremental or conversational approach, it's a bit easier to understand why the bot recommends certain things or makes certain statements. For example, in the bot that I've shown you, it's a very brief conversation. There's not really any conversation because the user provides a document and the bot returns a table. Whereas in Goole's version, there's a back and forth, and the user actually has to understand a bit about the outcome that is being edited or worked on. Whereas in my version, the user doesn't really even necessarily have to have read the report. So I see there the danger of becoming too distant from the data that we're working with and just letting the bot do all the work while not really understanding what the bot is doing in the background. And then lastly, experiment. There are many experts that say that the majority of evaluative tasks will be impacted by AI in the future. And I think that's pretty likely. This technology is here to stay. It will become integrated, and in lots of the software that we're already using, maybe some of the tools that we're using now will completely disappear. But for the moment, I feel at least encouraged to experiment, to know at what level we already are in terms of functionality and capability. And if there's any good practices within this larger community, I think it's important that we share this. And also consider some of the negative aspects of it, which we'll discuss now. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the ethical concerns have already been mentioned by you. There's, of course, the obvious one, that is factual accuracy. There's a big risk there that we just take for granted what is being produced or generated by these bots, and therefore that may lead to factual inaccuracies in our reports or in our own work if we just take this information as truth. So that's a big risk also in the larger scheme of things. I mean, right now we're looking at a handful of outcomes. We can go back to the source data and double check, but what if the input of data becomes much larger, where it's impossible to really double check? Do we still trust these tools enough? So this needs to be tested, and for the moment, I don't think we are there yet. Biases, so this has been commented on quite a bit as well. These models were trained on mostly English language documents, mostly documents that were available or produced, let's say, in the global north, and therefore they exclude a lot of the information and human thought that is available in all parts of the world. And so the risk here is that through, you know, emulating what the models have been trained on, certain biases, prejudices, and will be reproduced by those systems, and therefore lead to a very biased production of text. Privacy and consent. So this has been mentioned quite a bit in the chat. Obviously, we're working with information of individuals. That's why in the experiments that we've done, we've systematically removed those. I saw a question in the chat that asked whether that can be done automatically. I'm sure there's tools that do that. I mean, even Google Word has a search and replace function, but so far I've done that, or we've done that manually. And also, as a second point, data consent. Do we need to get the consent of those individuals that we are or whose data we are using? I think this is an open question to everyone. We're in this new situations where these tools are available, but it's certainly worth thinking about. There was a question on OpenAI and what it does with the data. It saves it. I mean, there's different levels of membership. So, for example, for the higher paid levels of membership, for it's called ChatGPT Team or Enterprise, OpenAI commits to not use your data for training, but nevertheless, it's saved on their servers. But that's also the case for many different tools that we're using, including Gmail or Microsoft. But yeah, there's certainly an open question there on whether that's good or bad. And lastly, once we have the results of what we've worked on with generative AI, are we obliged to communicate this to our clients, to our colleagues? Should we be obliged? Are there different levels? Maybe if I've used a chatbot as a mental sparring partner to generate a few ideas, and then I take this to the final result myself, maybe I'm not obliged to disclose that I've used it. But if I directly use different text that's been generated by an AI, maybe I should be. So this, again, it's an open question, but it's certainly something that needs to be considered. And with that, I think we're at the end of this presentation. I hand it back to Conny so that we can add or answer any last questions.
Thank you so much.
A lot of questions to digest, I guess, Conny.
Sorry?
Can I just kick off with one question, because it's related to the bots' specific functions. So somebody's asking, have you designed these 3 bots for the specific functions you've showed us, or are these just examples, or why the functions all 3 are able to do? Yes, and we should probably explain that. So of course you can use different AI tools to ask these kind of questions, but the advantage of the bots that we've developed is that they have the knowledge on outcome harvesting that we gave them. So it saves you time in having to tell AI that what does an outcome look like, how is it defined in outcome harvesting. So all these kind of things are already in the bot, and so that saves you time in using these. But you can definitely also try out other AI tools and see what kind of responses you get for these same tasks.
Okay. Well, thanks again. Super interesting. And I see loads of questions. As I was sharing, I've not been able to follow all of them. I see some of them have been answered. Let me start with Michael. Can you talk about any examples where you or a client disagreed with an outcome statement it has created? Do you have such examples?
So where the client disagreed with an outcome statement that was created through AI. The thing is, I will never accept just an outcome statement developed by AI just like that. So it will be my review of that outcome in the end. So in that sense, hopefully there is no disagreement.
Yeah, and for me, I've had to disagree with multiple outcomes that were generated just because of that fact that the methodology wasn't fully internalized by the tool.
Yeah. Okay. Other question. Let me see. Have you come across Enlightening, which is expected to provide the same AI support to outcome harvesting?
Yes. So yes.
Enlightening.
ALIs, yeah, we've been talking to them as well, and it's a different kind. So what we are doing here is providing the tools and putting them out there for people to use and experiment with AI. ALIs is they provide support themselves, so you can hire them to do some of these things for outcome harvesting, but it will be their support that you actually contract.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and there's a question from Conny, the other Conny. Do your AIs provide any checkpoints that will detect hallucination itself, like AI controlling itself? And do you ask the bots to provide the exact quotes or the citations they used to formulate an outcome?
Maybe I take this one. So on the last question, last part of the question, yes, the bot has been instructed to provide a verbatim quote on the text part that it finds most clear in terms of identifying the outcome. But it often also doesn't do that. The problem is also that once you're working with the bot and you're trying to fine-tune the instructions and you're setting different priorities in what you want the bot to consider. For example, what I've explained already, for me, it was very important that this differentiation between outputs and outcomes was internalized. It seems to deprioritize in the instructions other things that it's also supposed to do. So once I've got it to work on this differentiation, all of a sudden the column for where the evidence was supposed to be provided was empty. So there's, yeah, that's also, I think, just maybe a characteristic of the tool still. Both Goele and myself have experienced the tool changing the instructions itself based on the interaction that we've had with the tool. And so instructions that you've added yourself, all of a sudden you will go back into the back end of the tool and you will find them rewritten somehow and changed. And then obviously it doesn't put the same maybe rigor on certain issues that you wanted it to place on. So yeah, but in theory it can do that. So it can show you the evidence, and in my earlier versions it always did. About the self-correction, I don't think that's possible because it's still the same tool. Maybe there would be an external tool that would be connected and that does some type of fact checking, but that goes a bit beyond my information and knowledge about how different fact checking tools could be integrated. But I'm certainly once you take it out of ChatGPT and you start developing different external systems, I'm sure you can add two tools together and have one act more as a fact checker for the other one. But I don't know how effective that is.
Thank you. Let me just go on. Chris is asking, have you designed these three bots for the specific functions that you've showed us?
I've answered that one, Conny.
Sorry?
I've answered that one already.
Oh, okay, in the chat. Okay, sorry. Security aspect, we talked about that. Yeah, are there techniques to prompt more outcome statements from the bots? Well, that I think you've talked about that, huh? Then Leon.
That is for Leon, yeah.
I can maybe just give another example at some point. I tried, once it has given me 3 outcomes, I just asked it, can you maybe try to look further and try to find some more? And in some cases it did, and it gave me other outcomes, but then also those weren't always of the best quality. But you can kind of try to trigger it to do better and to put more effort into it. I've also used argumentation that I've read online is sometimes useful to get around this laziness that was talked about over the winter, I guess, of ChatGPT, where you can pretend as if you have paid a lot of money for the bot services, and then it will kind of try to give you good value for your money and try to do more work and try to give you better answers. But yeah, it shouldn't really be that hard, I don't think. But there are certain prompts, I guess, that will get it to do a bit more additional investigation.
Yeah. Okay. I can help.
Maybe I can take this question on the Julius AI. Somebody's asking if it can do the same, if it has a knowledge on outcome harvesting. No, so Julius is just doesn't have the knowledge yet. So this is specifically for our bots where we gave the knowledge. So Julius will have some knowledge on outcome harvesting, but it's not programmed to give you those responses. But it will get you, with the knowledge that it has, it will take you quite far. So I would just say try it out and experiment with it and see how far it gets you.
Yeah. And then Adam talks about, have you looked at building custom bots which don't require a ChatGPT subscription? And he mentions the chatbot UI, which is free but needs a bit of technical knowledge. Yeah, have you looked at other tools before getting to ChatGPT?
Yeah, I think this function of ChatGPT to make the custom GPTs is quite unique. Actually, I'm not an AI expert, though, by no means, but custom GPTs of OpenAI really gives this option for more people to develop actually these bots without having to do any coding for that is needed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll maybe just add on other chatbots that there's also open source large language models that can be installed on your own computer. It's not very accessible because you do need to have a little bit of coding at this point. But the advantage of that is that theoretically you would be able to use sensitive information and feed that to the bot without that information ever leaving your own computer. So there's a very particular use case for also some of our own members of our network that work with human rights defenders or journalists and activists that are that are facing repressive measures. That you can still use large data sets and explore that data, but it's not communicated via the internet. But I think that still has to become much more accessible to the normal user, because right now you need a bit of Python to install those on your own system.
I'm reading a question from Sebastian, who asked, did you ever test this in real outcome harvesting exercises already? And then another question, as we are more and more seeing the transformative and empowering potential of outcome harvesting, he would be highly interested if, in your opinion, using AI supports or rather undermines this empowering aspect of outcome harvesting. How do you look at that?
So yes, we've been testing it with real outcome harvesting inputs. I think it's also needed to really, develop the bots further. It's really needed to test it with real data to employ it further. And I would say, yes, it is really empowering and transformative. I mean, I'm really excited by what it can do and how it can enhance our work. So, but with the caution that we have mentioned.
Yeah. Let me see. Have you used it for the analysis part and sense making already as well?
Yes.
Like if you feed the bot 100 outcome statements, can it then extract findings based on those? That's a question from Benedict.
Yes, so it does extract, so you can just upload your Excel sheet, for example, with the outcomes and ask questions on that, and it will give you responses. And it's very helpful in sense. I would mainly use it in the sense of, okay, you know, I've done interpretation, I've done the analysis, I've done interpretation, but maybe I've missed something. So let's see what AI says and what it can really add to what I've come up with, and not the other way around. So not to take what AI has said and use that just like that in your evaluation report.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see there was a question from Barbara, which I cannot so easily find. Barbara, could you maybe pose your question? I'm scrolling all through.
Yes, I was wondering, thank you so much. This is mind-blowing. Goele and Leon, I was wondering whether you put in those potential categories of types of actors or types of changes, or whether the AI worked that out for themselves.
So that probably refers to what I've showed you, and in that case, I didn't predefine the categories. So this was what it came up with itself. But you could ask it and say, these are the categories. Could you categorize the outcomes according to these that I gave you? Yeah.
And Jay, also, you had a question. Would you mind posing your question? And then
Sure, I'm
Richard.
interested in how long did it take to build this? What learning did you make? How would you build the next one? What do we need to budget for this going forward?
Budget, yeah. We did this out of fun. So, you know, we spent our Christmas holiday developing these bots, and you go through. I actually read an article about it just this morning about somebody who developed this bot who had the same experience. It's about going through this excitement, like, oh wow, all these things I can do with this bot, and I can make it do, you know, a lot of things. And then you get all these bugs and things that don't work, and you go like, oh my God, really? And then you go back to like, oh yeah, now it's nice. You solve these issues and it's working. So there's really this learning curve, and we've been testing it out a lot. Like I said, there are no instructions really on how to do it. So both Leon and myself are still a bit looking for the right way to deal with it. For example, it has in the background, it has you can put the instructions in there, but like Leon has said, sometimes it changes the instructions. So our learning curve was like, we're not going to trust that. We're just going to upload a document with our instructions so that it really sticks to these instructions that we have developed. So there are a lot of like these small learning points that we had. I probably spent more time than I was planning to. I didn't really have a good plan beforehand, and I quite enjoyed doing it. But as said, it still needs to be refined further. So anyone who wants to test it out and provide feedback will adjust the bots based on that. So we will keep on spending time on that. But along the same lines, I would also, you know, ask the community, like these bots, you know, many people can make these bots. Maybe for some other steps in outcome harvesting, you would like to try it out and see where it takes you. So do experiment with it. Leon, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I think it's, yeah, describes it quite well. Maybe to add is that there's no coding expertise or experience required. So it's actually, from a technical standpoint, it's quite simple. You just create one of the accounts and you go into the create your own GPT, and then you can even have a conversation with the tool itself in order to find out what you want that tool to do. So it will ask you, so what do you want me to be specialized on? And you will say, yes, I want you to be specialized on creating Italian recipes. And then it will take you further down the conversation and ask you what it needs to, or what it thinks that it needs to know in order for it to be functional. It will transform all of the conversation into instructions that are then available. You can read them and you can adjust them. So that doesn't take so long. That takes maybe an hour or so, a bit of trial and error, and then a bit of a customization. But actually, I mean, we're not talking about pizza recipes, but we're talking about something that is there's a methodology behind it. So that's the tricky part. There you need to really fiddle. And I mean, I don't think still we have arrived at something that's very systematically good. So that takes time, yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, and wow for the presentation and all the efforts and what playing can do, right? That's once you enjoy something. And we're at the top of the hour, So I want to thank you all very much for being here, for all your questions, for sparking the enthusiasm. And I do hope to see you in our next webinar, which will be a presentation of one of the panels that presented last year at the American Evaluation Association conference. So follow up on, keep an eye on your mailbox for an announcement on that. Is there anything I've missed so far? Goele, Carmen, or can we say thank you and hope to see you soon?
Thanks a lot. And I would also suggest to keep the discussion going on the outcome harvesting forum. We can also take some of these questions that we weren't able to answer within the time and put them on the forum. So see you all there.